Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 166 of our little podcast. My name is Dr. David C. Noe. The C stands for clutch.
Clutch, yes.
Because I used to drive a manual.
Oh, is that what it's about?
That's right. I'm here in the Vomitorium South, the bunker deep in the hermetically sealed basement of the RHB bookstore and coffee shop, with my good friend and tremendous co-host, Dr. Jeffrey T. Tremendous Winkle.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I
didn't ask.
I'm coming out and stating it.
You're enthusiastic.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. But now you had me thinking about my old stick shift car.
Yeah.
And I think one of the very small pieces of evidence.
You got to connect us to classics. Can you do it?
No.
All right.
I'm connecting
to
what you said, just said before, Mr. Clutch. Is that I think one of the small pieces of evidence that our civilization is slowly fragmenting.
Yes.
Is that it's very difficult to find a manual transmission anymore.
It is hard.
And nobody knows how to do it anymore.
Yes. Although I hear it's having a renaissance with the young people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they like to drive the stick shifts.
Yeah.
They like to have something to do, I guess, with their right hand while they're cruising around and the car's driving for them. They still want to shift.
And they're texting with their left hand.
I guess.
Right.
I'm still contributing.
Right. But, man, I loved driving.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, yeah.
And you hear someone go by and they didn't quite have it down. And then you could put your hand to your mouth and say, grind some for me, will you? You know, because they were grinding the gears.
Of course. That's right, exactly.
That was a lot of fun.
Right, yeah. It was a little scary to be stuck on a hill behind a new stick shift driver.
Terrifying.
They come rolling back.
That's right. My first time I visited the UK, wherein one can find the British Museum filled with Greco-Roman antiquities.
Yes.
See what I did there?
Yeah, very nice.
Okay. The first time I visited the UK, Mrs. Noe and I rented a Vauxhall.
A Vauxhall?
It's Vauxhall, I believe is the spelling, but they pronounce it Vauxhall as only the British would.
Yeah, right.
And
is that like a riff on Valhalla?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a Ford product, I think. Rented this Vauxhall and driving it all over the UK, put on lots of, I don't know, something like 1 million kilometers, which is probably only a half a mile. I never quite got the conversion down.
Right.
But I couldn't figure out how to get the thing into reverse.
Oh, man.
And I thought, I was very young and stupid, and I thought the reverse on this thing is broken. So we got to the point where I was always parking in a way that I wouldn't have to reverse.
Yeah.
It's very simple. It was a manual.
Yeah.
You push the knob down. It was a knob issue. It's got the knob on the top of the stick.
Yeah.
And then you can move it into reverse.
Ah.
It took 3 or 4 days to figure that out.
But until then, you had to park very creatively.
It was awful.
Well, how was it?
Or push it out by hand.
Did you find it difficult driving on the other side in that? Or?
No, that wasn't difficult.
No?
But the difficult was the difficulty was shifting with my left hand.
Yeah, I can.
Right?
Yes.
Shift with your left hand, and then the feet pedals and.
Is the clutch in the gas reverse too?
No, they're in the
same place?
correct spot. Let me just say for our British listeners, not their spot, but the correct one.
Right.
It was such a challenge. Man. I thought I want to go back to grad school. That was easy. Parsing verbs irregular and defective, no problem.
No, I drove a Valhalla up through the Lake District. Right?
Scarcely made it out alive.
Man.
So what are we doing today, Jeff? And by the way, I'm doing well.
Are you doing? I'm glad.
Thanks for asking.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I'm doing really well.
Yeah.
I'm going to travel soon, some international travel.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave in a couple days. And whenever this happens, I get a little sentimental because I'm going to leave behind my routine and my loved ones and my books and so forth and venture out. And, I figure that if I were like a discount vacuum cleaner,
okay, yeah,
I would be much better off in this situation.
How so?
Well, a discount vacuum cleaner, few attachments.
Wow. Did you just come up with that?
No, I've been brewing on it for days. All right. What are we talking about today, Jeff?
We are getting back into Monsieur Marrou's history of education in Antiquity.
Henri Irenae?
Yes.
The same one?
Yep. And
Okay.
getting into his sections on primary schools and primary education.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is part 2 of the massive tome, and it's chapters 5 and 6, which are entitled respectively Primary School and
Primary Education.
That's correct.
Yep.
Now, Jeff, should we issue a kind of a listener warning here? Because when you were tooling down the stairs and when we were swapping emails, trying to work some alchemy on the coming episode, I have to say you were less than enthusiastic.
I was. And I think maybe I still am, actually.
Okay.
I'm approaching this one with a little bit of trepidation.
Okay.
So, I mean, let's all cards on the table.
Right.
I don't know. I just find I think I was complaining about the translator of this text. So Marrou is the French author.
Yeah.
And
if we could read mid 20th century French,
this might be a lot better.
It'd be a rip roaring tale.
So I'm getting a little frustrated with this particular translator. I think that for me it's an impediment.
Oh, really?
To enjoying the subject matter to a certain degree.
Well, you can read it directly if you want to.
From the French?
Yeah.
No, that'd be even worse because my French is terrible.
Je suis and so forth.
So, I mean, that's my only misgivings about this. It's just, it's I don't know.
But there is a segment of our audience, so I'm told, that's deeply interested in this subject.
Yes.
And I think that the approach that I want to take, at least the one that interests me, is the lavish praise heaped upon the educational systems of the past. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to bring a dose of historical reality, to throw some cold water in that face, you might say.
Yes.
That's what stood out to me in these couple of chapters, because although there are parts of the educational past that one might lionize, right?
Yeah.
You have to take it with a grain of salt. There's some reality here that's pretty unpleasant.
Indeed. I would say, I guess one of the things I did find quite interesting about this section and throughout is that. So when is this book? When did he write this?
1950s, early 1950s, right after the Second World War. Remember, there's a lot of anti-fascist,
yes,
an anti-fascist
that's right.
undertone.
Yeah, I find it interesting that Marrou will often make comparisons to his own present day,
right?
And just some of the his ideas about how education is seen in his own day are also very interesting, and and I think often at odds with how we look at education today. So,
definitely.
And so I think not only do we have this issue of dealing with the ancient past and ancient Greek notions of education and looking at them in clear light. We're filtering them, I think, through Marrou's notion of what makes good education, which doesn't always match up with what I think is the cultural lens that people use today.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And something else that occurs to me as you're describing that so well is that Marrou, were he alive today, would host a podcast.
You think so?
Yeah, because he is a popularizer.
Yeah.
The thing that you just mentioned, right, that he compares it to education today, and sometimes it's favorable, but often it's not. I think that really is the genius of someone like Marrou. And while I wouldn't use the term genius to describe us, that's what we're trying to do, right?
Yes.
We're trying to take this old material and present it again in a fresh way to a new audience. And I have to say that I have personally grown quite a bit in the process of recording these 166 episodes.
No, me too, without a doubt.
In the sense of changing my perspective a little bit. I'm not quite as hardcore, if it's old, it's good.
Yeah.
Are you surprised?
No, I am a little surprised that you changed.
A little bit, yeah. But only in the sense that, look, if it can't be connected to something that matters to people in the present, then perhaps it's of limited appeal.
Right.
Now, I don't want to throw in the towel altogether. We have to maintain, I would say, a study of the past for its own sake, but I like what Marrou is doing, right?
Yeah.
Compare the way things used to be to how they are now, because there's room for intellectual growth.
Right. I'm right there with you. I knew both you and I have been kind of out of the world of academic classics in that we are no longer part of a classics department.
No.
But I think there is out there in the world of classics, such as it remains in academia, I think there's a bit of a panic. And they don't quite know.
At the disco?
There is a panic at this particular disco.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of questions about right around what you were saying is again, how do we connect this to things in the present and make it relevant? I was invited to be part of a panel at the next APA.
Oh, nice.
That's not the APA anymore. SCS.
It's the Society for Classical Studies, right?
And so I'm going to join.
Did you accept?
I did. I'm going to join via Zoom. It's in Philadelphia, but I'm not making the trip. But the question is they've gathered people like me, who once were part of departments and are now in kind of more broader, diffuse departments. Like
because you're teaching things like comparative religion,
film.
You've taught some Shakespeare, even.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And
so a real Renaissance man.
It's very broad, but in addition to things like art and archaeology, mythology too.
Right.
And so the question that this panel is around is well, how do we if that's the way things are going, how do we keep the classics alive? And so I'm on a panel with, I think, a number of other community college professors who or at least have their degrees in the classics,
right?
Talking about this. I'm looking forward to seeing what
Interesting.
happens. But I think it's indicative of, I think there's some floundering out there.
There is.
Yeah.
And after you have that experience, when is that event? Is it January?
Yeah, early January.
We should probably talk about it on the program.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about it. That'd be good.
Yeah.
I know two answers to that question that are not ways to keep the classics alive.
Okay. Yeah, please.
And the one would be to try to constantly make them as updated and relevant as possible. Mm-hmm. So constantly using identity politics in classics. So reading Ovid through the lens of feminism and all that. I'm not saying that has no value, but I don't think that it is the key to keeping the classics relevant. In other words, if you focus too narrowly on one aspect of the Metamorphoses, for example, you're going to lose the majority of your audience.
Right.
And the opposite extreme, I guess, would be to use the classics as a way to bring about a moral renewal of society and culture.
Right.
And so I guess I would have a criticism of both kind of the left reach toward the classics, which you might describe the first one as, and the rightist reach toward the classics.
Right.
So part of the answer is just appreciate what it is as the beauty of the artistic expression.
Without a doubt. And I think part of that too is I think that you have to keep them alive and to keep them relevant, you have to kind of recognize something of the universal in them. Right?
Exactly.
And something of the kind of the inherently human in them. Right. So
that's what makes them timeless.
Exactly. I'm of the opinion that, at many, many levels, human nature just simply does not change.
Right.
And I think when you do apply some of these kind of more theoretical lenses, you're kind of saying, well, the classics will change every few years when a new idea comes up. There's nothing constant about it, right? And if you remove that foundation, my response is always, well, then why bother?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And that goes along with the instrumentalizing of it, right? Don't try to instrumentalize it, accept it for what it is.
Exactly.
So that's why we're approaching Marrou, part 2, chapters 5 and 6. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to begin with this quote from page 142. The title of the chapter is The Primary School, right? What we would call the elementary school.
Yep.
Education proper, says Marrou, paideia, did not begin until the child was 7 and was sent to school. Until then, he was merely brought up, a notre fait, reared at home by women, by his mother in the first place, but chiefly, in all the reasonably well-off families, by his nanny, Trephos, who, according to the purists, was different from the nurse proper, Tithe. Both were usually slaves, but occasionally free women, and the nurse stayed with the family, tenderly regarded by her foster child until she died.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It's really interesting. It makes the literary reference makes me think of Eurycleia's relationship to Odysseus.
Absolutely.
Who maintains
as an old woman, right?
Maintains kind of this motherly concern for him, in her dotage.
It's interesting. Nice word. It's interesting that when Odysseus comes back, right, whom does he greet? I mean, he wants to see Laertes and he wants to see Penelope, of course. His mother is gone, Anticlea. But it's Eurymachus, the old man, the swineherd.
Eumaeus, sorry.
I'm sorry, Eumaeus. Yep. Thank you. And Eurycleia, the nurse, who seem to be the objects of the majority of his non-erotic affection.
Yeah, it's really quite striking. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as you say, the very first person that Odysseus goes to is Eumaeus.
That's right.
Not his son, not his wife, not his father.
Right.
Yeah, exactly right.
So she was a slave, this woman, the Trephos, maybe a free woman, but she stayed in the home until the time of her death. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting mix of, from contemporary perspective, right, slavery and so forth, obviously not good.
Yeah.
And yet there's still some genuine affection in that degraded relationship. Right. That continues.
Right. And I think it's important to note that when we talk about slavery in terms of what we're talking about here,
right,
the image, I think that often pops people's mind is like the chattel slavery of the American South,
right?
And this is I'm not defending slavery,
obviously,
but this is of a different order,
right?
Yeah.
So then the next section, the absence of infant schools. Jeff, did you go to school as an infant?
I did not. I think I started preschool when I was 5, maybe.
5, kind of a late bloomer.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you? Were you in school?
Oh, I was not in school until I was 5, and then I went to that German school.
What?
Kindergarten.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right, as we all did back in the day.
Right. Did you go to preschool?
Absolutely not.
No?
I got preschooled at home.
Okay.
Whatever that was, I don't know.
Yeah.
I primarily remember the little toy with the string and you set the nice arrow on some animal like the rooster.
Oh, yeah.
Then you pull out the string and it spins around and it gives you what sound the rooster makes.
The cow says.
Exactly.
Right, yeah, I remember that thing too.
I mean, I had that mastered, right? By the age of, I could tell you what sound any animal made.
Yeah.
That was real important to me.
Yeah.
And I thought, if this is education, send me to Harvard, because...
You didn't need to even pull that string.
No.
Yeah, you knew it all. Yeah, exactly.
And of course, you remember the fun part was to see if you could get it to malfunction.
Yes, exactly.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
If you set the arrow halfway between cow and horse, you could get the thing to say, the cow says, and then the horse sound would come out.
Exactly. And all kinds of like creepy, cryptid implications. Right?
Speaking of creepy and cryptid,
Yes.
our friends Mormo, Lamia, Empusa, and Gorgo come up again.
Okay, I did enjoy this part.
I know you did, because we did an episode on this. It was a Halloweenish
did
kind
we
of
talk
episode.
about that?
Yeah, we did.
Damn
It's
it.
frightening, things that go bump in the night. You want to read that portion there about Baukalemata?
Sure.
How the child came into contact with literature?
Yes. In these early years, too, he began to learn something about his own culture, talking about the child here. Like any child today, he entered the enchanted world of music by hearing cradle songs, Baukalemata. He came into contact with literature through his nurse's tales, animal stories. There were all Aesop's fables, for instance, tales of witches, terrifying figures, Mormolukea, like Mormo, Lamia, Empusa, or Gorgo. There were all kinds of stories. Insofar as the old traditional religion lasted into the Hellenistic times, this was the age at which myths and legends about the gods and heroes were taught. But there was no effort to systematize all this into a regular course of learning.
And I say good.
Yeah.
Good. Let's let the kids have some fun with their pull string toys and I guess they're terrifying demonic creatures that stalk them.
Right.
Mormo, Lamia, Empusa, and Gorgo.
Yeah.
Were you taught stories like that as a kid?
No, I mean it
Yeah.
was. I'm very grateful to my parents for reading to me
Yeah.
a lot when I was very little. I think that was very, very important.
Yes, for me too.
But it was not systematic.
No, not at all.
There was a pile of books.
It was freewheeling.
It was very freewheeling.
Right. And at the time, there was no Goodnight Mush, thankfully, so we didn't have to suffer through that.
Yeah, but I find it really interesting that that the ancient parents would tell their children stories about these particular creatures. The one with Mormo is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the story about before their parents would shut the door to the bedroom, they would say, "Watch out, Mormo bites."
Yes. Stay in bed.
Stay in bed.
Terrifying.
And Mormo being a kind of female vampire.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had games and toys, Marrou tells us. Mm-hmm. So those people who say, I'm studying classics, but I'm getting kind of a thin philosophical or literary exposure to classics.
Yeah.
I've heard that criticism before, along the lines of, tell me how they really lived. This book has it.
Yeah.
Right? It describes that stuff. For example, at the top of 143, then as always, the children had rattles, dolls, some of them jointed ones, rocking horses, little carts, cups, and saucers for their dolls' dinner parties, small gardening tools and balls, and especially knuckle bones for games of skill. Dice kinds of things.
Right.
The Greeks did not look upon this as important. It was called paideia, childishness. The ancients would have laughed their heads off if they could have seen our infant school and kindergarten specialists, Froebel or Signora Montessori, gravely studying the educational value of the most elementary games. Isn't that interesting?
That is really interesting. My wife went to a Montessori school.
Did she?
Up until
that explains a lot.
It does up until 6th grade. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then he breaks out Plato on us in the middle of the page there.
Yeah. Plato wanted to make children's games an introduction to the professions and even to science. He wanted children to go to school earlier, at the age of 6 instead of 7. Aristotle went 1 better and said 5. Chrysippus went 2 better and said 3. There was no time like the present, apparently, for these theorists. Fortunately, there were advanced opinions which the average family recognized as such and went on its own sweet way.
Yeah. That's charming, right?
Yeah.
So once the philosophers of education got involved, it became a kind of a competition. Who wants to send the child to school earliest?
Yeah, exactly.
Plato says, let's send them to school, I don't know, at the age of 6, not 7. Aristotle says 5.
Yeah.
No, even younger.
3.
Right, take them right out of the womb and, put them,
place them,
in a desk and get them started.
Right, yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think one of the things that struck me is, despite what the opinions of these guys, the tone of the whole chapter seems to suggest that, by and large, the ancients didn't think much of education before age 7.
Right.
At
Didn't
all.
give much time to it, much attention, no system, no approach.
Right.
None of the, the baby Mozart or the helicopter parenting.
Right.
Just let the kids run around.
Yeah.
And have you heard of unschooling?
No.
Yes.
Well,
there's public school, there's homeschool, there's private school, there's Catholic school. There's also unschooling.
What's unschooling?
It's the system, and it's a real thing.
Yeah.
The child pretty much drives the curriculum. If the child says, I want to learn about X,
yeah,
then you get a pile of books from the library, and the child learns about X for a while until the child gets tired, and then the child moves on to Y.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Wow. I mean, in some ways, that sounds a lot like the Montessori theory. Like it's student driven learning. But I guess a kind of unschooling. But I guess personally, I'm more in line with that general tenor.
Yes.
Here. These theories about.
But that's because we're old guys, right? And our kids are out of that stage, and we've been teaching a long time.
I suppose. But when I hear these these political debates about finding money for universal preschool,
right?
And because that's going to give everybody the head start that they
right.
need, and it makes me
a little skeptical.
Makes me roll my eyes a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because the wealthier counties are still going to have the more high quality paste and Play-Doh, and
right. And there's this thing also called one's basic human endowment, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much that a person can do, no matter what the nurture is.
Right.
There's this element of nature.
Nature, exactly.
That applies. Well, what about the pedagogue? This is the top of page 144.
Yeah.
I thought this was really interesting, especially in light of what the Apostle Paul says in Galatians chapter 3. Where he talks about the law of Moses being the pedagogos, the pedagogue that was supposed to lead people to Christ.
Yeah.
So could you read that portion that begins, "Indeed, the pedagogue"?
Yes, I will. Indeed, the pedagogue was entrusted with the actual moral education of the child, as distinct from the technical instruction imparted by the various teachers, to which he often made his own contribution as a kind of monitor, making the child learn his lessons, etc. Thus he carried into Hellenistic middle-class life the part played in the days of the Homeric heroes by the tutor. His importance is reflected in his actual name. In Hellenistic Greek, pedagogos often loses its etymological sense of slave companion and begins to take on the modern meaning of the word pedagogue, someone who was an educator in the full sense of the word, though he remained distinct from the master whose work it was to impart learning.
So that's an interesting development, is it not?
Yeah.
So this is the guy who was a slave of the household and took the kid to school.
Yes.
Right? But he grew in his role to become a teacher of morality and someone who was supposed to eventually even impart literary knowledge to the child.
Right. Yeah. And
that would be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought, please.
I was going to say that would be similar to my riding the school bus to public school when I was a kid. That would be the modern pedagogue.
Yeah.
I would get on the school bus, and the school bus driver, I could tell you their names because I happen to remember them.
Really?
They would do things like play Top 40 radio. Break up fights among the older kids that lurked in the back, always threatening to break out a cigarette or pummel little people like me.
Yeah.
I guess that the bus driver was the pedagogue.
Yeah.
But didn't impart a lot of instruction.
No.
At best, as I was getting off, they would say, "Have a nice day." They'd open the door with that big handily thing, with all the levers.
Yes.
Or I suppose they'd protect me from being pummeled by the bullies in the back.
Yeah. I like that. I never thought of that along the lines of one being a pedagogue.
Yeah.
I mean, elsewhere, Marrou talks about how, there's evidence that this would be, as the kid got older, would become an irritant. And the pedagogue is more like an unwanted chaperone that is there to kind of prevent them from perhaps having the fun that they want to have. And
so you probably didn't ride a bus to school, did you?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Did you have an assigned seat with a little name on it? And
did not. It was a free-for-all.
Wow.
It was always kind of slightly terrifying because I was at the end of the route, and so you never knew what was going to be open.
Yeah.
I did. That's bad memories. Yeah.
So
and my bus driver did not care. Just 1,000-yard stare in the front.
I didn't say my bus drivers cared a lot. I just said that they fulfilled the role of pedagogue.
But,
in some sense.
I mean, you suggested that your bus driver actually broke up fights?
Occasionally.
Really? That just made our bus driver drive faster.
And then the big story was when someone would, challenge the bus driver physically. And then we all got really terrified at that.
Man.
So the spread of primary schools comes next in the chapter.
Yes, it does.
The word master, says Marrou, didaskalos, is used without qualification. It is the master who taught reading, who is meant the grammatistes, grammatodidaskalos, and the school, the didaskaleon, is the place where he teaches. Mm-hmm. So this is the teaching of grammar.
Yeah.
And the Greeks, in typical fashion, spread this pattern all over the Hellenistic world, down even into Egypt.
Yes.
And had they not done so, we wouldn't have the papyri and such from Fayum,
Yes.
where we can see some of the early textbooks. What did you think about this portion? Did this grab your attention?
It did. In that, if I can digress just a little
Please.
bit. So last Friday, I went on a field trip with some of my art and archaeology students, and we went to Ann Arbor.
Oh yeah, you went to the Keller? What is the word? Kelsey Museum there.
Which is fantastic. To my fellow Michiganders, I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's free. It's on University of Michigan's campus. It has docents there that are very knowledgeable and very friendly. So I highly recommend it. But the other place we went to was to their papyrology collection. And I've done this a number of times with students, and one of the things they always emphasize is that the vast majority of the papyri that they have on hand there and study is not tomes of Homer or the New Testament, although they have those. A lot of it are these school texts.
Yes,
and these writing boards for practicing your letters and practicing your syllables. And copying exercises of writing kind of simplified forms of Plato and of Ovid, and my students were really struck by this. I mean, even one of the young ladies said to me, she says, "This really brings it home. It really makes you realize that these were just real people like us."
Yeah,
right. And and I think that's often a problem in often teaching the classes.
Absolutely,
we treat these. We treat these subjects as these elevated, untouchable things
because of the great distance.
Of course, the great distance, but in doing so, we kind of lose the human touch.
Right.
And so, seeing that stuff right in front of you, these papyri were from University of Michigan, dug out of the same desert that not far from Fayum.
That's right.
Are revealing these very same things. So it's
and of course
fascinating.
Found there because of the very dry climate. The sand preserves the papyri.
Exactly.
As I was trying to think of an analog for this, my mind went back to grade school and middle school days, and maybe you can relate to this. It's amazing to me what I used to find entertaining or how easy it was at the time because of the dearth of screens and so forth.
Yeah.
I'm going to sound real curmudgeonly here, but the stuff that entertained us, it's astonishing. My example is you would be issued textbooks at the beginning of the year, right? And in the front, there's a little table, a little chart, and you had to write in your name and then the date, and you could see which kids in the grades above you had the textbook the previous year.
Yes.
You remember that?
Of course.
Then you could sort through and see what kind of smart aleck remarks they made on various stuff. But where I'm going with this is that you got to cover your textbooks. Remember that? With those textbook sleeves? Oh,
yeah. I did.
And I can remember, not having a lot of disposable income, so I would use the paper bag from the grocery store, the Meyer bag, which you cut up with scissors, turn inside out, wrap it around your textbook, and then you could decorate it yourself.
Yes.
And that was big time fun. That was so exciting.
It was, right. I remember kids doing the same kind of thing, and it was a way to kind of garner some kind of small scale popularity.
And personalize it.
Yeah, right.
But then there were the kids who had the pre-printed, themed kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
Camouflage or the Dukes of Hazzard or the X-Men or Barbie or whatever was popular at the time.
Yes.
I thought, wow, those kids have really arrived because look at how they've wrapped their textbook.
Right.
I'm using paper bag.
Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of the same difference with the kids who brought the lunch in the paper bag and the kids who had kind of the fancy metal lunch boxes.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about that before, but to me, it's endlessly interesting.
Right.
With the little thermos on the inside that's thematically matched to the outside of the box.
Yeah.
Kids have always been the same. And I wonder what these kids did with their pedagogos and their textbooks.
Yeah. Now I have to say that I hope this is clear from the episodes we're zeroing in on, but the vast majority of evidence that Marrou is drawing upon is Hellenistic Greek Egypt, right? And the reason for that is because that's the place we're finding these papyri.
That's right.
That kind of stuff just simply doesn't survive in the more moisture laden north.
Yes.
Right.
So not in Italy, not in Britain.
Right.
So inscriptions,
yes,
but it isn't the same.
But right. So our evidence skews towards Hellenistic Egypt, and I wouldn't say this is a criticism of Marrou, but often he can seem to making some kind of universalizing claims when in fact the bulk of his evidence is from one narrow place. Yeah.
So what about the school building?
Yeah.
I know someone might think the school building. Do we really want to hear about that?
Well, it's a very short paragraph.
Yeah, but my school building was made of brick and block and poorly painted, and that gymnasium was huge. And then have you visited your childhood gymnasium?
It's been years, and I haven't.
It's like a closet now. Just because the scale of things has increased, but I'm larger also.
Right.
So.
Right. Did you ever go back? Did you ever
of course.
go wander the halls? And
a little bit.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's quite unnerving. I keep thinking Mormo or Empus is going to jump out because these memories are old now, right? These memories are going on 50 years. Yeah. So.
No, I remember going back to my elementary school. It's got to be over 20 years now, but I remember the first thing that struck me is that it smelled exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
And that just brings all kinds of things flooding back.
Right? I find that odors are much more evocative of the memory than other kinds of things.
Indeed.
You can take you right back there. So what about the school building?
Well, it's a short paragraph because I think Marrou admits we don't know a lot. He says we have no very precise information about the kind of buildings that were used as primary schools. As for a long time used to be the case with us, and is still the case in Muslim countries, they probably had any old room, not one specifically or specially designed as a school room. One room was all they needed. Some have said that it was also a waiting room, which the pedagogues used as a kind of common room. So
that would be the teacher's lounge.
The teacher's lounge, that's where they're playing cards and smoking.
At least when I was a kid. And you could never go in there, right?
No.
Terrifying.
Forbidden.
What are they doing in there?
Right. But this seems doubtful. The pedagogues probably stayed in the schoolroom itself and sat on one side, and as they are represented as even doing on 5th century vases. All right. So there weren't special school buildings.
No.
So you just needed a place with a roof and have at it.
Yeah. But they had a thronos, right? The master had a thronos.
A big old chair.
Yeah, an armchair with slanting legs in which the master himself sat pontificating. And backless wooden stools, Bothra, for the pupils.
Sounds so uncomfortable.
Oh, only if you're the pupil. I want to be the master.
Well, I wasn't talking about the throne. I was talking about the bar stools they're sitting on. Yeah.
No tables, stiff writing tablets enabled them to write on their knees. This was a really interesting statement. As usual with furniture in those days, artistic decoration was considered more important than utility or comfort. So this is something I could go back to.
Okay.
Because now I think comfort has gone to the extreme, right? It's a classroom filled with beanbags. Giant beanbags. How are you supposed to get any work done when you're sitting in a beanbag? You can't keep your limbs in their right proportion.
Right.
So a little bit of artistic decoration, like a hard marble floor.
Yeah.
Some dental molding, some crown molding, something like that.
Yeah. You're in favor of bringing that back?
I want it to all look really good.
Yes.
And I guess comfort is an afterthought for me.
Gotcha. Yeah. It says, Marrou continues, our sources of information which have so little to say about the equipment of these schools leave us in no doubt that they were decorated in a way befitting a sanctuary of the muses, with images of these revered goddesses or masks of the kind used in the theater or at Dionysiac feasts hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
Okay, so a nod towards divine inspiration.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Do you have any sense or memory of the posters and such that covered the walls of your elementary and middle school and high school?
I don't. I remember
classrooms?
I just remember the hallways being filled with like student artwork.
Yeah.
Especially as you get into the.
I raced past that as fast as possible.
Right.
No.
It's the same. As my kids have kind of grown up too. That has not changed. As the walls in their school are covered with reports, or you can. Oh, they're doing an astronomy unit.
Right.
So, do you remember?
No, I guess the only ones that stick out is when they started recruiting celebrities. For posters to tell us, that education was good.
Yeah. Reading is fundamental.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Or the Fonz says, read a book, he's pointing at you or something like that.
I'm remembering this now.
And
yeah.
I don't know. That didn't have a big impact on me.
No.
Or the cartoon Hulk surrounded by books.
Right.
I just wonder, I don't think it had really any impact, but I wonder who were the minds behind that? Too much time on their hands, too much money. This will make all the difference.
Right.
If the kids see the $6 Million Man,
exactly.
Doing algebra, that'll push them over the edge into being serious students.
A kid saying, well, I wasn't going to study for this test, but Ponch from Chips.
Right. He looked at me seriously and said, study,
stay in school.
But there's a tremendous amount of effort devoted to trying to set the right environment for kids to learn. And I just really don't know whether in antiquity or in the present that's meaningful.
Yeah, no.
One thing I like to say often, and maybe you've done this too, is that when I'm in the class and I'm writing on the board and the student says something like, Professor Noe, I can't read that.
Yeah.
Or why did you write that there? I usually say, I never took any of those classes that teach you how to teach. So this is the best you're going to get. I just got the content. Don't ask me to make the classroom look nice. This is it.
Right. Yeah. This stuff also kind of brings up for me too is there's endless discussion, as there's always been, about the different ways that boys and girls learn. Right?
Yeah.
And you hear stories about how the percentages in colleges now it's almost across the board 60-40 women to men.
Yeah.
And I would say that even in my own classes, it's probably 75% young women. And a lot of people, well, what's going on? Well, boys don't learn well sitting at a desk.
That's
right?
the claim.
That's the claim, right?
Yeah.
There's the
they should get some beanbags.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe I can see that argument making more sense for like in elementary school, right? Where my youngest son is constantly bursting with energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he hates sitting at a desk for hours at a time.
Could he get one of those stand-up desks?
Maybe that would be.
I don't think it'd make any difference.
You don't think so?
No, it's being stationary.
Yeah. Yes.
It's being deprived of the feeling of freedom.
Right.
I would guess more than it is your particular posture.
Right. Yeah. But I even think about I have 3 boys, and all 3 of them gravitated towards learning in 3 radically different ways.
Yeah.
So any kind of grand unifying theory about what's going to work for kids, capital K, I'm skeptical.
Yep. Sure. I love this on the status of the master. This is page 145. Throughout antiquity, says Marrou, the teaching profession remained a humble, somewhat despised occupation.
This grabbed my attention.
Fascinating.
Too. Yes.
It could be thrown up against Aeschines and Epicurus, for instance, that their fathers had been reduced to it.
This is brutal.
So you could mock them. Hey, your father was a teacher. Like the Victorian schoolmistress or governess, the teacher of old was essentially a man of good family who had gone down in the world. A political exile, a wanderer without a land of his own, quote, whom poverty has reduced to teaching. A tyrant who had lost his throne, like Dionysius of Syracuse. So, hey, didn't you used to be the tyrant of Syracuse? Yeah, but now I'm teaching Algebra 2.
Right. Keep reading because it gets better.
Remember Lucian's kings, who are stripped of all their wealth in Hades and compelled to sell salt or old boots or become school teachers. And then this quote is great. He's either dead or else he's teaching somewhere. Some wag says about someone who is missing.
Oh, man, that's brutal.
How many times have I said, hey, where's Jeff? Well, he's either dead or he's in a classroom.
Man, that is so harsh.
It is. And I wonder, what's the difference? Because now I'm going to say that a lot of what I hear today about how noble the teaching profession is, I'm going to say plainly, a lot of it is driven by desire for money.
Yeah.
There's envy. Right. Why should some guy that kicks a football, why should some guy that puts a ball through a hoop get a $97 million contract?
Right.
I'm shaping future minds and I don't get very much. Mm-hmm. So I think some of that is driven by money, but I don't think that explains all of it.
No.
Because this is a big difference.
It is, right? I mean, I think there's, I think there's a similar vibe out there is that I think a lot of people, at least give lip service to, the nobility of the teaching profession. But they say, would you give up your job and go do it? Oh,
no way.
No way. Are you crazy? Right?
I can't spend time with 8th graders with all their raging hormones. Right. They say things like that.
It reminds me, I think we've talked about this on the show, is there is a similar kind of paradox when we talked about like playwrights in the theater, is that on the one hand, you celebrate the playwright in the context of the art form and all that's Sophocles, wonderful, great. But at the end of the day, I would never dirty my hands to do that, or to be an actor,
right?
And so I think maybe a similar kind of thing. You praise it, or you kind of recognize its necessity on the one hand, but with the other hand, you make a rude gesture towards it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So on page 146, we get into a little bit of economics, and I was hoping you'd bust out a cocktail napkin again. You have no idea what a big impression that made on me. when you tried to scratch out some economic figures.
Yes, exactly.
Did you do that here?
It crossed my mind. I'll have to see if I have a napkin in my pocket here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what about the pay? Because this will be interesting to
Yeah.
all professional teachers, some of whom are listening, I think.
Teaching was a paid job, and
Okay.
what was worse, it was badly paid. The most detailed documentary evidence about this is to be found in the epigraphical school charters in Miletus and Teos. Hey, so we're actually getting outside of Egypt
Yeah.
now. All right.
Yep.
So in Miletus, a teacher got 40 drachmae a month. In Teos, 500 drachmae a year. That is a normal year. It was a bit more, of course, when there was an extra month in the year. In both cases, this was slightly higher than the pay of a skilled workman, which was usually a drachma a day, but the difference was not sufficient to give the teacher any appreciably higher standard of living.
So a guy that digs ditches, right, or hauls barrels of olive oil down to the dock,
Yeah.
makes a little bit less than the teacher.
Yes.
Just a little bit less.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I would say my cocktail
Yes.
napkin calculations, which really have no grounding in anything.
No.
But so in TS, you're making 500 drachma a year.
Right.
If your workman salary would be 365
Yeah.
drachma a year.
Right.
Let's correlate that to 40 grand.
Yes. Sounds pretty good.
500 drachma would put you at, I don't know,
60?
60.
But, as he says in the next paragraph, quote, and then again, he did not always get paid regularly. Miletus and Teos were exceptional. Teachers' salaries were guaranteed by the money that came in from a foundation. They went down on the city's budget and were paid out of the city treasury according to certain definite rules. But everywhere else, teachers had to run the risk of dealing with private customers. In theory, they were paid at the end of each month, like the municipal teachers in Teos and Miletus. But parents, short of money, sometimes made them wait, and there were always Scrooges, like the one in Theophrastus who tried to economize by keeping his son away from school during the month Antistherion, on the pretext that as holidays took up so much time during that month, there were not enough school days left to warrant the expense.
Right.
I can relate to this.
How so?
Well, when I was a kid, my family observed the family vacation religiously. Mm-hmm. So if there was some time that my folks wanted to go on vacation, they just pulled me out of school.
So they didn't wait for spring break?
Absolutely not.
It was just-
They usually combined it. I went on a 3-week vacation.
Did you really?
Yeah, I think it was 5th, 6th grade.
Yeah.
Funny story. My dad said, "Now, don't tell a bunch of your classmates because I don't want everyone to know that our house and farm equipment and everything
Are empty?
is going to be abandoned for 3 weeks." I said,
Right.
"Don't worry, Dad. I won't tell anybody." I told one girl that I was kind of fond of.
Yes.
I'm leaving for 3 weeks. And I said, "It's a secret. Don't tell anybody."
Yeah.
Her name was Sarah. She said, "Oh, I won't." And she told the whole classroom. And
Sarah?
they made this really nice going away card.
Oh, no.
But it had everybody on it. So my dad's plan was ruined. But the point was,
Yes.
my parents would say, "We're going to show the kid the country. Mm-hmm. He's going to read a lot of books.
Yeah.
It's okay."
Yeah.
Kind of like the Antis. We're not keeping him in the whole month because, he can miss a few days.
Right. And that was education of another stripe, right?
I think it was.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it a lot. Did your parents do anything like that?
Yeah, they didn't take me out. Both my parents were school teachers.
Ooh.
So they were kind of handcuffed by the school calendar themselves. But yeah, no, every spring break. And a lot of our travel was, my parents said, we're not just going to a beach. This is for the educational betterment of our two boys. And so, Civil War battlefields.
Yeah, but you had a big pack of Twizzlers in the back.
Lots of Twizzlers,
yeah.
right? Exactly. Lots of grape soda.
Bladders before burgers.
Exactly.
So
right.
you were set.
But yeah, almost every vacation, no matter what the focus was, there was going to be at least a museum or two.
Some learning.
Yeah.
So what about the contempt for the teaching profession? This is another great paragraph.
Right here. But the fundamental reason for the contempt in which the teaching profession was held was that it required no special qualifications. Nowhere was it thought necessary for school teachers to undergo professional training like that given in our modern teachers' training colleges. The school laws in Miletus, which contain so much valuable detail, show how teachers were elected. No qualifications were required, and all that the electors were bound in conscience to do was to choose those most capable of dealing with children. Except for moral assurances about good character and honorable conduct, it seems that no guarantees were demanded. Technically, anyone who could read was considered capable of setting himself up as a teacher. He simply had to remember what he had learned in school.
Yeah.
All right, so that's part of it. Right? There's virtually no bar to clear to become a teacher. Right?
Works for me.
Yeah.
He says then, but I do not wish to draw too dark a picture. However badly paid they may have been, the teachers in Miletus at least were slightly better off than their colleagues in the gymnasiums, who only got 30 drachmae a month. Okay. And scorned though it was, the profession was so obviously useful that it occasionally received a certain amount of official encouragement. You like the very qualified way in which that's put?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, what's left in this chapter before we go to the break here?
We're going to talk about the school and education, timetable of classes, school calendar. That's on tap here. But
shall we skip ahead to the school calendar?
Yeah. Because
I thought this was quite interesting. Page 149. Could you read a little bit of this as to how they divided up the school year?
Right. So Marrou writes, here, for example, is what might be called the academic calendar for the city of Kos in the middle of the 2nd century BC. Kos, is that an island? I'm blanking.
You're thinking of Chios.
That's what. Okay, so Kos, middle of the 2nd century BC. It's for the month Artemisian, and includes the following festivals and examinations when apparently classes were suspended. On the 4th, festival in honor of Poseidon. The 5th, Ephebe sports. He talks about that earlier in this book,
yes.
Right? About like the competitions for the young men, right? So they no classes on those days, like track and field day.
That's right.
On the 6th, procession in honor of the deceased king Eumenes II of Pergamus. On the 7th, festivals at the sanctuaries of Apollo, Cyparissus, and the 12 gods. So right there, 4 days in a row, no school.
Then children's sports that same day.
Same day, yep.
But then you go back for the 8th and the 9th. But then the 10th, a festival instituted by Pythocles in honor of Zeus.
Yes.
And then the 11th, more sports.
More sports.
Then the 12th.
Festival at the temple of Dionysus.
But then 2 days of school, 13 and 14. So you'd have time to work on your social studies project.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe build your Fort Ticonderoga out of popsicle sticks.
Your volcano with the vinegar and the baking soda.
Baking soda. Yeah. Right. And then maybe, watch a film strip.
Exactly. But then on the 15th, another festival at the temple of Delian Apollo.
But 16, 17, and 18, you're back in school.
Right. Yeah.
But the 19th, another procession in honor of the Muses. So imagine being a citizen of Kos and you're having dinner with your kids that evening. You say, what did you learn today? Sorry, Dad. We had another procession. Another?
Right.
Didn't you proceed back on the 6th? Yeah, Dad, but it's the 19th. We had to proceed again.
Right.
Okay.
But now there's a stretch.
All right.
The 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. 5 days in a row.
So you could read a book of Homer, maybe learn a little geometry in there.
Yeah, exactly.
But then the 25th.
More Ephebe sports. Man, they love their track and field.
And 26th.
A procession in honor of the reigning king, Attalus II, or 3rd.
Yeah, but then 2 more days of school, 27 and 28, and then the end of the month.
You get your exams.
You get your big exam.
So probably the 27th, 28th, you're prepping for the exams, and then you have the exam. So that's very few school days over the course of 30 or so days.
Yeah, in the month of Artemision.
Yeah.
Interesting. This made a total of 8 festivals, says Marrou, and for the children, 2 examination days. In the preceding month, they were not so lucky. They only had 6 festivals and 1 examination day. Beside these official holidays, each child had his own special holiday on the occasion of any particular family festival. His birthday. Do you remember going into school on your birthday?
Oh yeah, we were expected to bring a treat.
That's right. If you were the birthday kid, you
brought the candy.
You had to shell out candy, cookies.
Yes.
Yeah, and my mom would often bring something midday, something really, really nice.
Yeah.
And then for a moment, you were the hero.
Of course. Oh man.
Because the kids, we get a break, we get a procession to the cake.
Right.
The day his hair was cut to mark the end of early childhood, and similar days for the rest of the family, important events like marriages and so on. You start to wonder, was there a lot of learning going on here?
Doesn't sound like a lot of learning.
No.
And I mean, it's hard for me to even wrap my head around this kind of organization of time.
Right.
Until, the 7-day week is instituted.
Yeah.
Right. And during our school years, there's a fall break, you have a winter break and such, all at the same
spring break.
A spring break. Maybe it's not all that different, but here, month to month, it could be crazily different.
Yeah. And speaking of not much learning going on, it's time for the ads.
All right. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Hackett Publishing. We love these guys. They've been with us from the very beginning.
You betcha.
With their offices in Indianapolis, Indiana, and in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They are keeping the flame of the classics alive.
Absolutely. Yep. Not cursing the darkness, but lighting a candle and reading a book by its glow.
Yes, indeed. Do yourself a favor. Go to hackettpublishing.com. It's HACKETT publishing.com. Check out their massive catalog. Yes, there are a ton of classics in there. There's also lots of tomes from different corners of academia. And what you're going to find there are attractive volumes. They're going to be wonderful, erudite translations, and extremely affordable.
Absolutely.
Those are difficult needles to thread in this day and age. And so check it out. Find the books that you want. Drop them in the little grocery basket, and if you type in, what's the coupon code?
The coupon code is AN, as in Ad Nauseam, which is the podcast to which thou art listening. Mm-hmm. And then you add the current year, 2024. So AN 2024, and you will get two wonderful things, Jeff.
Yes.
A box of chocolates in the mail, right?
Yeah, not that.
No?
But even better.
Okay.
20% off your entire order and free shipping.
Check it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the great folks at Ratio Coffee. My friend, former student, and entrepreneur Mark Helweg birthed this idea like Athena from the mind of Zeus about a decade ago. And he said, there is no high quality countertop pour over coffee machine. I'm going to make one.
And he did.
He did. Not just one. He made three.
Right.
He made the Ratio 8, the Ratio 6, and the Ratio 4. Yes. Now, Jeff, did you have your coffee routine this morning?
Absolutely. I had my grounds ready to go. I had my tank and my Ratio 8 filled. I hit that button. You just got the 3 stages, the bloom, the brew, and it's ready.
That's incredible. Now, you're brewing on the 8, stainless steel. What kind of accents you got?
I got walnut accents.
Walnut, nice.
Yes, very nice.
And so it goes up through the Fibonacci head.
Yep.
Hot water goes down in, off gases the CO2, making a delicious cup of coffee.
Yep.
There's none of that BT.
No, none of that brackish tang.
Ooh, and down into the hulking flagon.
Yes, which keeps it warm for hours without the necessity for a scorch pad underneath.
Yeah, you could transport plutonium in that if I'm not mistaken.
If you wanted to.
Yeah, did you serve some to the lovely Mrs. Winkle?
Yes, I always bring her a cup in the morning.
Nice job.
She loves it too.
That's a happy marriage based on coffee.
Now, I know from what you said to me before the show is that you learned that the Ratio 4 has arrived at your door.
The Ratio 4 has arrived at my front door. So I texted one of my kiddos and I said, bring it in, please, because I've been waiting for it. So they did. And when I get home, I'm going to do something that I haven't done in a long time.
Which is?
Brew a second pot of coffee.
Oh, man.
I had my Ratio 8 this morning. Fantastic.
Yep.
Put a little cream in there. I'm going to try the Ratio 4 when I get home. And you ought to try it out too, I might say.
And so, Dave, if our audience wants to get one of these incredible machines, the 8, the 6, the 4 now, what should they do?
They should go to ratiocoffee.com, RATIO coffee.com. They should check out the many fine machines. The Ratio 4 is going to come in under $250 for a really high-quality machine. It's not the flagship, but you're going to be having the best coffee of your life. And then put this coupon code into the checkout when you get there. Jeff, what is the coupon code?
Yes, for the month of November, it is ANCO3R.
ANCO3R. And what does the R stand for?
I think I was just watching some 80s movies last night. Right. I think it stands for RAD.
RAD?
Yes.
Take your coffee to the RAD level.
That's
15% off ANCO3R.
Check it out.
Jeff, as we get back into it now, we are on Chapter 6 of Part 2, Primary Education, and I really have to blame this all on you.
Why?
Well, because you said, these chapters, they're a little dry, but then when we got into it, it's been so interesting.
They're coming alive.
All right, so we got to move through this here, and what are we going to look at when it comes to primary education?
We're going to talk about the reading lesson, or do you want to dive right into the alphabet?
Yeah, well, I think we should get this part about the reading lesson. There was nothing comparable, says Marrou, to our reading by wholes, which I think means sight words. Nor was any effort made to arouse the children's interest by giving him little sentences like, the cat sat on the mat, once he had learned the necessary letters. Hellenistic schools despised such humble exercises. Its method was based on a purely rational a priori analysis of the thing to be learnt, in complete indifference to any of the learner's, i.e. the child's, psychological problems. Learning proceeded from the simple to the complex, from the part to the whole. So if I'm understanding this rightly, Jeff, the way that reading was taught to children was there were no props, there were no supports, there were no colored drawings.
No.
It was just, here's what a letter is, here's a syllable, here's a word, now figure it out.
Right.
That was it.
Just toss the kid into the deep end.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds brutal.
Yes.
Now, Marrou says that, as I think would be expected, that
Right.
children's reading and writing would begin with learning the alphabet, right? So what does Marrou have to say about this?
Well, he says they learned the 24 letters one after another, not as we do by their sounds, but by their names, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, etc., and apparently without knowing what they looked like. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have above your elementary school chalkboard, A stands for Achu, B stands for
Yes.
book,
Absolutely.
that kind of stuff?
Yep.
That was fascinating as a child.
Yep.
But they were soon given a written alphabet, says Marrou, with capital letters arranged in columns, and this they would recite or probably chant in chorus.
Yes.
From the 5th century, 4 lines of verse were used containing the whole of the alphabet. It goes like this. Est alphabet de gamma delta te te kai. Zete te theta iota kappa lambda mu. Nuxe ta u pe chro ta sigma tau ta hu. Paran te fe te he te to pse ace ta o. And that's it.
Yeah. I have to imagine they had probably a little bit of a little tune to go with it.
Yeah, I think-
kind of like our alphabet song.
You think they could march around the room maybe and proceed? And so
Yeah, perhaps me.
I think the answer from Marrou is no way.
No way?
Well, that would make it easier for the kids.
I suppose,
We're
right?
not interested in that.
Unless they were preparing for some procession
Yeah,
that was on the
maybe.
next day.
On the way to Apollo.
Right.
You want to read that next part there?
Yes. Thorough work. No wonder they were proud and thankful when they knew their letters, quote unquote, grammatica gignoskein. And no wonder a kind of religious awe surrounded these first elements, stochea. The letters of the alphabet, it must be remembered, were used as figures and musical notes as well.
Yeah.
As samples of this religious awe, the historian will note with interest the strange belief that the letters of the alphabet were symbolic of the cosmic elements, the 7 vowels being associated with the 7 notes of the scale, and the 7 angels presiding over the 7. Where's he going with this? Where this?
Come on.
Kind of just drops this out of nowhere.
No, it's numerology.
Yeah.
You know there are 7 notes, right? It's the middle C, C, D, E, F, G, B, A, and then C starts over.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence, Winkle.
But what about the sharps and flats? There's way more than 7 notes.
What about Jeffrey Toobin and Freemasonry, right? Was that Toobin?
That was 2.
You got,
he put the Patty Hearst. But,
oh, sorry. You got the 7. You've got the 7 vowels.
Yeah.
Alpha, epsilon, eta, iota, omicron, upsilon, omega, and there just happen to be 7 notes in the scale. And
Yeah.
there just happen to be 7 planets.
Yeah.
Coincidence?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely a coincidence.
I don't think so.
They were thus used to make charms and amulets, for since they had the marvelous power to reveal a man's thought, they must be full of a mysterious magic potency. Now, speaking of this,
Yes.
at the papyrology collection at University of Michigan, the director showed us this small little amulet of a folded up papyri.
Okay.
That was filled with a kind of just what appeared to be random combination of vowel sounds.
Yeah.
So that's indicative of the very thing that he's talking
Yeah.
about.
So you don't think vowel sounds can ward off evil spirits?
I don't, but a lot of people apparently did back
Why is it then when you encounter something really frightening, you let forth with a burst of vocalic sounds, not typically consonants?
Ah!
Exactly.
or when you're really interested, like, ooh.
I hear no consonants in there.
Maybe there's something
Obviously.
here.
So
Okay.
let's go on to syllables.
All right.
Having cleared the first hurdle, this is page 151, the pupil went on to syllables, and with the same passion for system, he was taught a complete list of them in their proper order. No words were attempted until all the syllables had been combined in every possible way.
Wow.
You ready for this?
Yeah.
The simplest came first. Ba ba baby bo boo bo. Ga ga gay up to psop sep sep seep sop soup so. And these apparently were not simply pronounced according to their sound, like I was doing,
Yes.
but by the name of each individual letter first and then as joined together. Beta alpha ba, beta a bay, beta a to bay.
And so on and so forth.
Sounds awful.
This sounds horrible.
It does.
Yes.
The pupil, page 152, then passed on to 3-letter syllables.
No.
Yes, made up of different combinations of letters. The oldest method we know of, it dates from the 4th century BC, involved putting a consonant, nu, for example, or beta or lambda or rho or sigma, after each of the syllables in the preceding table. You ready for this?
Drop it.
Okay, this gave bon ben bain bin bon boon bone, gun gan gain, up to psan sim same sim son soon son. Or conversely, the first consonant could remain unchanged, and this would give bob beb bog beg bod bed. Or the same consonant would come both before and after each vowel, and that gave bob beb babe gog geg. Then it began to get really complicated.
Oh no.
Bras bres brace gras gras.
Oh man. Oh,
You got to do it.
it's brutal.
The cat sat on the mat.
yeah.
No.
No.
Bras bres brace gras gras.
Bo ba bee ba boo bum. My goodness. Wow.
So that's that. And then after we go from syllables, Jeff, we get what?
we get words.
We get words.
Right. When the syllables had finally been mastered, the children went on to words, and here again it was a case of a step at a time. First of all came the monosyllables. Some of the lists given in school papyri are rather strange, for not only do they include ordinary everyday words, but some quite rare ones, and even words whose meaning seems to have been unknown to the ancients themselves.
So that to me is the crazy part right there. Here are some words, kids, but we're not sure what they mean.
Right.
Such as
lunks, links, straks, stronks, drop, clogs, howl, klops, thief, and then knocks, meaning unknown, and Marrou suggests maybe milk or itch.
so knocks, Kappa Nu Alpha Xi,
Yeah.
could have one of these two different meanings. Mom, I'd like a glass of itch.
Right? What are you asking for? Right. No, it seems to me this is just an extension of the previous.
Right.
You're just practicing syllables.
You're practicing
It's not
sounds.
about the words yet.
Not at all.
No.
So he says these seem to have been especially chosen for their difficulty of pronunciation.
Okay.
Like our gnome. How would you spell gnome, Jeff?
How would I spell gnome?
Yeah.
N-O-M.
That's right. And pneumonia, for instance. Crazy.
Yeah.
Then on the top of page 153, we've got two more almost completely impronounceable words. Knaxbix, apparently the name of an illness, says Marrou, and phlegmadropes, whose meaning is unknown, but which was probably a medical term also.
Yeah, so we're not building vocabulary here.
No.
We are just kind of, they're tongue twisters.
So how you feeling, Jeff? I got a bad case of...
Of the Knaxbix?
Yeah. I'm suffering from phlegmadropes.
Exactly. I can't come to school today.
No. And then there's this phrase containing all the 24 letters of the alphabet used once only. Isn't that incredible?
It is.
I'm going to try to pronounce
Please. Yeah.
it. Bedozopskthom plektron sphinx.
Man, and this is gibberish?
It's gibberish.
Yeah, but it reminds me of the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. So
to learning to type.
to
learning
type
to type.
and testing your keyboard, right?
But every kid had to learn how to say this,
Yes.
which is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
According to Quintilian, the technical term for such gibberish was chalanoi, bridles of the tongue, or muzzles. Children were trained to say them as quickly as possible because they were supposed to help pronunciation and eventually get rid of any faults of speech.
Yeah. So I guess it's to help you articulate really well.
Right.
And maybe even for persons who had speech impediments.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it would be like if you had a speech impediment and being forced to do this. It must have been really miserable.
Yeah. Marrou goes on, I think it's still coming up, is he talks about how even for those who could read, most reading was done out loud.
Exactly.
Right. So I think probably there was much more of a premium on pronunciation than perhaps we would give it today.
That's right. So then once you've got syllables, words, it's on to texts and anthologies. And I just want to read a little bit here. This is page 153. Apart from the matter of the syllables, there seems to have been no effort to grade these exercises, meaning, go from easier to harder. If we turn to any 3rd century manual, we shall find isolated words immediately followed by selected passages from Euripides or Homer.
Sheesh.
We may well be surprised by such extraordinary teaching methods that presented the child with such difficulties at such an early stage in his career. The only parallel I can think of, see here how Marrou is the popularizer?
Yes.
Is to be found in our classical music. Ancient collections for beginners, such as Bach's Little Clavier book for Wilhelm Friedman Bach, or Rameau's Pieces for the Clavichord, begin with a, quote, first lesson, obviously meant for beginners, but then immediately go on to pieces that soon become really difficult. Hard.
Yeah, really hard.
Really hard. How could that be?
Man.
All right. Well, moving along then, perhaps we skip to writing on page 155.
Yeah. Writing was taught in the same way as reading. There was the same indifference to psychology, the same progression from the simple to the complex, from single letters via syllables to words to short sentences and continuous passages.
Yeah.
We have no detailed evidence about the kind or kinds of writing that were taught. There was a cursive script. There was also a system of writing by capitals, the letters being very carefully written at regular intervals in a kind of chessboard pattern. This kind of writing was called stoichedon, and no doubt it was for drawing the necessary squares that a curious ruler was used. This was made of 2 strips joined at right angles, and it appears from the 5th century onwards in vase paintings of school scenes.
So, interesting detail about how they would have to practice on these little strips of paper.
Right, and then we saw this too at University of Michigan. They found these kind of wooden boards that you could write on with ink.
Yeah.
And the way that you would blot them out was just simply sand it down, and it'll leave you with another level. So it sounds like with writing, it was just a written version of what they were doing with the Bo-Be Bob Bib Boop, right? You were just kind of writing these combinations of letters.
Yeah. I want to say 2 more things before we get to the brutality of discipline, which closes out the chapter and is quite interesting. This is page 156. After the letters came the syllables, judging by the clumsy, childish way in which lists of syllables have been found copied out. Then came single words. The master would draw initials in alphabetical order on an ostraca, that's a potsherd, and the child would add the rest of the word, racking his brains to find nouns or other words ending in us. So if it's us, then he has to come up with pus, foot, chromaius, the Romans, saphus, wise people, taurus, bulls, and huius, sons. So that's how they would add words to their vocabulary.
Yeah.
And so there seems to be a little bit of reason to that in terms of the sound.
Yeah.
The sound comparison.
Right. And then just the repetition.
Yeah.
Just to beat it into your skull.
Can you tell me, Jeff, page 157, this was fascinating and more than a little confusing for someone who's not especially gifted with numeracy like myself. Yes. I mean, you got your cocktail napkins, but the part that starts at the elementary school too, I imagine?
Yes, at the elementary school too, I imagine. The child learned to count on his fingers. This was something very different from what we mean by that expression. It was a real art with strict rules which enabled the 2 hands to indicate any whole number from 1 to 1 million. The last 3 fingers of the left hand indicated the numbers 1 to 9, according to the extent that they were bent towards the palm. Tens were indicated by the relative positions of the thumb and first finger of the same hand, and the right hand was used in the same way. First finger and thumb, last 3 fingers, to indicate hundreds and thousands. Tens and hundreds of thousands were indicated by the position of the left or right hand in relation to the chest, navel, or thigh bone. A million was indicated by the 2 hands locked together. It's
incredible.
It's incredible.
Had you ever heard this?
No, I mean, I can't picture it.
I was trying to
I saw that over there
here, and I got stuck at 637,459.
That's where you gave up?
I thought I might get to 1 million, but the chest, the navel, and the thigh bone, depending on which hand, and then the
position, like the 3 fingers versus the other 2.
I thought, how can I thought I was an educated person.
Yeah.
Never have heard of this.
No,
or have the ability to replicate it.
This is crazy. And it's really impressive.
It is.
Yeah.
Could you read the rest of that, Jeff?
Yes. Yeah. We have quite forgotten the system nowadays, but it had an immense vogue in the West, even in the schools of medieval times, and is still employed in the Muslim East today. Known to have been in everyday use in the Mediterranean world from the time of the early Roman Empire, it may have first appeared much earlier in the last centuries before Christ. Yeah, this is brand new to me.
Fascinating.
Really interesting.
Fascinating. In the last portion of this chapter, brutality of discipline,
yes.
A page and a half. So he begins by saying on 158, Plato, it will be remembered, maintained that a child was old enough to learn to read when it was 4. But Hellenistic teaching seems to have lagged behind somewhat. In AD 234, it was still not extraordinary for a 9-year-old child to be incapable of writing his name. One such was no mere country bumpkin. Hold on, Marrou. For at the age of 40, he was comarch of the district. We come across children of 10 or 13 in 265 AD who are said to be still learning their letters. This seems to show the psychological defects of the methods employed.
He goes on, as in the schools in the ancient East, teaching remained rudimentary. Teachers had no idea how to make learning easy for their pupils except by spoon-feeding them in the way that modern educationists detest. Tradition having decided what was to be taught, we have already seen how. The teacher's job was simply to go on repeating the same thing over and over again until the child saw the light. To deal with what he deemed to be insubordination, he had one method to fall back on, and he never failed to make use of it: corporal punishment.
Yeah.
So beat the kid.
Yeah, you know George Orwell?
I do.
Right, his very famous work, 1984. He hated the study of the classics, and I'm going to paraphrase here. I didn't look up the exact quote, but he said, I doubt whether the classical languages can ever be taught without corporal punishment.
Really?
Because that's what he received in the British school system.
Yes.
Didn't learn his Latin, didn't learn his Greek. He got whooped.
Got whooped, yes.
And consistently.
Yes.
Marrou continues, apart from fear, the only psychological motive for learning was emulation, which, as I have already attempted to explain, was a potent influence on the Greek soul. But curiously enough, of all the competitions that Hellenistic cities and their wealthy benefactors so richly endowed, very few were open to primary school pupils. Another sign of the low esteem in which these schools were held. So, a completely competitive environment, but not for the littlest kids and not in education.
No.
Which I don't know if they thought that was a mercy to the kids or they just didn't care.
My sense of it is more B than A.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
You want to read about how Rondus drew up his sketch of a school in Koksalos?
Sure. Marrou writes, here's how Rondus draws up his sketch of a school. Koksalos is a lazy little boy who has played truant, so his mother takes him to his master Lampsacus to be punished. The poet's realistic talent leaves us in no doubt as to what happened in cases like this. The culprit is hoisted onto the back of one of his schoolfellows, and the master himself comes in. Where is my hard leather strap, the bullock's tail I used to beat rebellious boys? Give it to me before I lose my temper. And Koksalos cries out, Oh no, Lampsacus, by the muses and the life of your daughter, Cutis, please don't use the hard strap. Beat me with the other one instead. Yikes.
Tough.
Very tough.
Tough slogging.
Yep.
He continues, education and corporal punishment appeared as inseparable to a Hellenistic Greek as they had to a Jewish or an Egyptian scribe in the time of the pharaohs. No doubt as the Greco-Roman period wore on, there was a certain growth of sensitivity, and the conscience of these ancients began to feel a few qualms. Chrysippus is said not to have disapproved of corporal punishment, which is proof at least that he regarded it as a problem, or that it was regarded as a problem by the people around him. And I think we should end the portion here. Under the empire, the Romans began to lose some of their original severity and show a desire for less brutal teaching methods, giving children little presents, such as cakes, as a reward for their efforts. But any progress that was made was moral rather than educational. It was the inhumanity, not the inefficiency of Orbilianism that was criticized, and there was thus little change in the actual teaching. So Orbilius is the famous, as you no doubt know, the famous tutor of Horace.
Yeah.
And Horace complains about how Orbilius was full of whips.
Yes.
Something like plagis plenosis, I think is the term. So none of the schools of antiquity ever shared our illusions about teaching without tears. They had their own motto: no progress without painful effort. Meta lupes garhe mathesis.
No pain, no gain.
No pain, no gain.
Yeah.
Even in teaching.
Yes.
That seems like a good place to end.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of the famous Pink Floyd song, We Don't Need No... Another Brick in the Wall.
Yeah.
Which is...
Pink Floyd is a rock band, right?
Yes. Right.
Why are you looking at me that way?
We don't need no education. You know what I'm talking about.
I don't know the song.
You don't...
I'm not a Pink Floyder.
You don't have to be a Pink Floyder to know.
Good, because I'm not going to be.
Okay, well, the song is a complaint about the brutal corporal punishment in the British boarding schools.
Whoa.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So is there someone trying to get into the Vomitorium, Jeff?
Yes. What is this? It's the UUE.
Yeah, the Union of Ungame Enthusiasts.
Wow. Who's enthusiastic about the Ungame?
Hopefully no one. You ever played the Ungame?
I remember it was in the house. I don't think our family ever really played it, though.
It's unfun.
It sounds unfun.
It includes such questions about as describe the most unpleasant job you'd ever had to do.
Okay, and so I take it that the person who describes the most unpleasant job wins this game?
No, there's no winning.
You get more points?
There's no points.
There's no points?
You take a little token.
Yes.
One of those tiny little, I guess it's like an inverted golf tee.
Yes.
And they're in different colors.
Okay.
A nubbin of an inverted golf tee.
Yeah.
Nothing sharp and dangerous and interesting. And you march it around all these little squares, rolling dice. And you don't go to places like, I don't know, Candy Cane Forest and Gumdrop Mountain.
You know, nothing like that?
You go to places like...
Share Your Feelings Land?
Yeah. Shack of Depression. Apathy Dock.
Oh my gosh.
It's true.
Oh, this sounds horrible.
Share something that no one knows about you under personal.
Share your feelings about financial security.
Tell about a family tradition that you enjoy. Describe an ideal vacation. Yeah. So that's the Ungame, and those folks,
they're
trying to get into the Vomitorium to record their own Unpodcast.
They want to get down here and not play this game.
That's correct. That's correct.
So we got to get out of here.
We do.
Right.
But before we do, we need to thank some people. Jeff, whom ought we thank?
Mishka, of course, our wonderful, intrepid engineer who puts this all together so nicely and so quickly. And Dave, how about these musicians? We got Scott Van Zen. We got
screaming guitar, a little bit of Eddie Van Halen, a little bit of Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yep. Yeah, fantastic. Ken Tamplin, too.
Yeah, giving us the bumper music, composing the music, playing the bass, the intro and the outro. Very grateful for these guys and their generosity to share this music with us.
Indeed, yes. Dave, how about if people want to get in touch with us?
They should write to Jeff at adnauseum.com. Do not forget the V in ad nauseum.
Yep. And to write to Dave, they can write to Dave at adnauseum.com. Again, do not forget that V.
We've gotten some good correspondence. We have just about given away all of our spare copies of the Stanley Lombardo version of Ovid's Metamorphoses.
Fantastic.
So look for those in the mail. We would really love to hear from you. We want to know that people out there are taking in the classics.
And keeping them down.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And Jeff, would you like to talk about your Moss method for Greek instruction?
No, I think I'm going to leave that to you because it's your method.
Okay.
Yes.
Mossmethod.com takes you from...
neophyte to erudite.
Exactly. And if you don't want to go with bun bin bin bun bing bong bong, you can study with me instead, and I'll teach you the alphabet. I guarantee it will be much less painful and no corporal punishment, much less painful than how they learned Greek in Antiquity.
Excellent.
Also,
yes.
No long lists of rules to memorize and then forget.
Yeah.
Instead, you can read actual Aesop and Herodotus and Thucydides adapted for your level graduated. There may be better programs out there. There may be better teachers. I'm not qualified to say. I am extremely confident there is not a better value.
Excellent. They can find this by going to mossmethod.com.
That's correct, mossmethod.com. And I have a Latin program, latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. Hans Orberg's book, Lingua Latina per se illustrata, Latin teaches itself. Again, I'm going to say the same thing. There's no reason not to learn Greek or Latin if you want to. My programs are self-paced, expert accessible, and I would like to say affordable. So please check them out.
Excellent. And Dave, a little hiatus for us, I believe.
Yeah, we're going to have a couple weeks off.
You're going out of the country.
That's correct.
Yep. We're not going to be able to...
I'm sorry?
I'm eager to hear about your adventures.
Yeah. We're not going to be able to record again until early December, so we would just like to say to the listener, thank you for listening,
yes.
And you can check out some of the back catalog, the What's a Motto You, and the What's a Motto You 2, that's a favorite one, Cranks for the Memories.
Yes.
Got a lot of those out there, so maybe spend some time in the catalog.
Yeah.
And so, Jeff, not the next week episode, but episode 167, what are we thinking?
I think we got some time. We got a little bit of time off to ponder that.
All I want is a couple days off, right? In the words of Huey Lewis.
Indeed, yeah. So
okay.
I think we'll keep that. That TBD. Yep.
Keep it under the lid.
And I believe you have our gustatory parting shot today.
Yes, I do. This comes from the inimitable Benjamin Franklin, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure.
Franklin says, "The discovery of a wine is of greater moment than the discovery of a constellation. The universe is too full of stars." So that part, the wine part, I don't know. I'm not a big wine discoverer.
Nor am I.
Not much of an oinophile, although I like a glass from time to time. But it was this part that stuck with me.
Yeah.
The universe is too full of stars.
There's too many of them.
He's complaining. Get all these stars out of my vision.
I guess so. I guess there wasn't that much light pollution in colonial Philadelphia.
So you'd think he'd be able to see a lot of things, but he doesn't want so many stars. Apparently. He just wants another glass of wine.
I guess so.
All right, Ben.
All right. Thanks for listening.